The billionaire CEO's autistic son screamed non-stop on the plane, but the flight attendant does the unthinkable, and he falls madly in love. The billionaire CEO's autistic son wouldn't stop screaming on the plane. Passengers grew restless. Some rolled their eyes, others whispered cruel comments. The father's face showed both love and helpless pain, until one flight attendant stepped forward. She didn't follow the rules. She didn't ask permission. She did the unthinkable. In a single brave act, she silenced the chaos and touched his heart in a way no one else ever had. One moment of compassion, one extraordinary choice, and in that instant, the billionaire CEO looked at her, not as just a flight attendant, but as the woman who changed everything. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. Can't you do something? Please, make him stop. The voice sliced through the cabin air like a judgmental dagger. Row 14B. A woman in pearls with a stiff designer blazer and eyes that had never softened for a stranger. The child in seat 2A kept screaming, a high-pitched, heartbreaking wail that had started before takeoff and showed no sign of fading. Some passengers pressed their call buttons. Others whispered, exchanged glances. One man shoved in earbuds and muttered, "This is going to be the longest 5 hours of my life." The father sat frozen, not stoic, not cold. Just frozen. One hand gently rested on the boy's trembling back. The other clenched on his own knee so tightly it had turned white. His head was lowered slightly, but not in shame, in pain. Real pain. Natalia Brooks, lead attendant on Flight 718 from New York to San Francisco, had seen her share of fussy babies, stressed parents, and delayed takeoffs. But this was different. The child, 7 maybe, had that same desperate look her little brother used to get. The one that said the world was too much, too bright, too loud, too fast. His legs kicked rhythmically, fists tapping his thighs, the sound of his own voice somehow anchoring him in a world spinning out of control. And no one seemed to care, except the man beside him. Natalia tucked the passenger manifest into the side pocket of the service station and stepped toward 2A. It was none of her business, technically. She could wait for the supervisor, call the ground team, follow protocol, let the father handle it. But her heart didn't ask for permission. She crouched gently beside the boy, far enough not to overwhelm him, and said, not too loudly, "Hey, sweetheart, I brought you something." In her palm was a small red silk ribbon, coiled like a sleeping snake. It had fallen from her scarf earlier during prep and landed in the crew drawer. She'd meant to throw it away, but something told her to keep it. The boy stopped mid-cry, not completely, but a fraction of a second, enough to hear her. His eyes, wide, wet, and furious, locked on the ribbon. Natalia kept her voice steady, calm, kind. "It's a magic ribbon. It helps when things feel too big." "Want to hold it?" His little fingers twitched, hesitated, then grabbed. And for the first time in 23 minutes, the cabin held its breath, and he stopped screaming. A full second of silence, then another, then 10. Natalia exhaled slowly, so did half the plane, but the most stunned expression came from the man in seat 2B. He turned to her, sharp jaw, elegant suit, eyes the color of winter, and blinked as if she were a mirage. "How did you—" he started, voice deep and rough with exhaustion. "I didn't," she whispered. "He did." The boy twisted the ribbon, watching how it caught the overhead light. His breath slowed. His body relaxed, and Natalia didn't move, not until the father did something almost no one noticed. He removed his tie, slowly, quietly, and folded it on his lap like a surrender flag. 10 minutes later, Natalia was in the galley pouring herself a water when Ava, the junior attendant, now stepped in. "That was insane. Did you see her?" Ava whispered. That lady in 14B called the kid a menace, out loud. Natalia didn't answer. Her hands trembled slightly as she sipped. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving a strange warmth in its place. A few seats behind first class, 14B was still fuming, but in 2A, the boy was now curled up against his father, holding the ribbon tight, his little cheek resting on a shoulder that had stopped shaking. "Do you have children?" the man asked later, when she offered him a fresh coffee. She nearly dropped the pot. "Me? No, just a little brother. He used to have moments like that. I learned to keep quiet toys in my purse." He nodded slowly. The coffee sat untouched between them. "I'm Damien. This is Caleb." She smiled at the boy, who was now humming softly, not to disturb, to soothe himself. "Natalia," she said. "Nice to meet you both." Damien's eyes didn't move from her. His expression softened just a hair. "Thank you," he said. But it wasn't polite. It wasn't automatic. It was personal, like no one had said thank you to him in a very long time, and meant it. Hours passed. Meals were served. Natalia made sure Caleb got soft scrambled eggs instead of the planned boxed lunch. She even found a small chocolate coin in her purse. Wrapped in gold foil, when she placed it beside his tray, he looked up, startled, and gave the smallest, quickest smile she'd ever seen, like a shy sunrise. She caught Damien watching her again, not flirtatiously, just watching. There was a question behind his eyes, not about the ribbon or the boy, about her. As the plane began descent, a different kind of tension rose, one of knowing the moment was about to end. Damien hadn't said much more, but once, when Caleb dropped the ribbon under the seat and Natalia bent to pick it up, his hand brushed hers. It was unintentional, but neither moved for a second too long. When they landed, most passengers rushed off, the usual shuffle of luggage, relief, phones buzzing. Natalia stood at the exit, helping with goodbyes. And there he was, Damien Vaughn, billionaire CEO, tech royalty, infamous for boardroom takedowns and zero personal interviews, now carrying a sleepy boy with a red ribbon tied gently to his wrist. He stopped before stepping out. "I'd like to thank you properly," he said, voice low. "It's part of the job," she replied lightly. But her hand clutched the edge of the service cart a little tighter. "I don't mean as a flight attendant." Then he reached into his coat and handed her something. Not a business card? A small velvet ribbon case. She opened it after they left. Inside, a note. "To the woman who saw him, truly saw him. If you're ever in San Francisco, I owe you dinner, and more than a thank you." Damien Vaughn. Natalia stared at it for a long time, but what caught her breath was what was nestled beneath the note. A second red ribbon, a keepsake, not the one on Caleb's wrist. Before they left the airport, he gently retied the original ribbon on Caleb's wrist, like a message, or a beginning. 3 days later, Natalia stood in the break room of the JFK Crew Center, holding the small velvet case with her keepsake ribbon like a secret. She hadn't told anyone, not Ava, not her roommate, not even her mother, who would have exploded with theories ranging from "he's in love with you" to "he's part of a secret European royal family." It was easier to pretend it hadn't happened. Easier until now. "Miss Brooks?" She turned. A tall, older man in a charcoal suit stood in the doorway, holding a sleek white envelope. "You've been requested," he said. "Mr. Damien Vaughn would like to see you. He's in the first-class lounge." Operations had already cleared her entry as guest on request, and a lounge supervisor would escort her inside. Natalia blinked. "What? Why?" "He said you'd understand." She didn't. Not at all. But 20 minutes later, there she was, stepping through the frosted glass doors of the flagship lounge, where uniformed staff weren't supposed to linger unless on duty. Heads turned. She ignored them. Then she saw him, Damien Vaughn, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, tailored black suit, no tie, sleeves pushed up slightly, an elegance so effortless it felt theatrical. But it was his smile when he saw her that stunned her most. "You came." She crossed her arms. Not cold, just cautious. "You flew here just to see me?" "No," he said smoothly. "I was here for meetings. You just happened to be at the top of my list." That was when she noticed the boy. Caleb, sitting quietly at a corner table, headphones on, coloring a soft sketch of a tree, and wrapped around his wrist was the original red silk ribbon, the very first one Natalia had given him on the plane. Natalia's breath caught. "He kept it," she said softly. "He needs it," Damien replied. "He hasn't gone a day without it. Even sleeps with it beside his pillow." She didn't know what to say to that, but she felt something shift, as if a line had been crossed between past and present. He gestured toward a private table. "Lunch? This feels—" She hesitated. "A little too Cinderella." He smiled again. It was real this time. "Cinderella had to leave by midnight. You can leave whenever you like." She gave in. And 15 minutes later, they sat over light pasta and tea, Caleb nearby, content, glancing at her every so often with a flicker of shy trust. "What does your company do?" she asked. "Artificial intelligence." "Mostly enterprise software. Not very romantic. I work in an aluminum tube 30,000 feet above the ground with crying babies and spilled ginger ale. You're not selling this lifestyle as any less appealing." That made him laugh. A low, surprised chuckle that turned heads. And for a moment, they weren't CEO and flight attendant, just two people having lunch. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His jaw tightened. "Excuse me," he muttered. He stepped aside to answer, leaving his phone screen visible for half a second. Natalia's heart skipped. Victoria Vaughn, incoming call. That name rang through her like a fire alarm. Victoria Vaughn, ex-wife, former business partner, known for her icy grace, razor-sharp legal mind, and rumored disdain for, well, anyone not bred for power. Damien returned moments later, his face unreadable. "Sorry about that." "Your wife?" Natalia asked, trying to sound neutral. "Ex. She still has your last name. She fought me to keep it." His eyes were distant now. "Didn't fight nearly as hard to keep Caleb?" Silence fell. Only the soft clink of Caleb's pencil tapping the table broke it. Natalia's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she said. He looked at her. "Don't be. He's better off." The air felt heavier. Natalia reached over instinctively, thus not touching his hand, just placing hers near it, a quiet offering. Still, can't be easy, being both dad and fortress. He gave a half smile, sad but grateful. Then, right when the moment softened, Caleb's voice rang out. "She's pretty." Damien and Natalia both turned. The boy was staring at her with total sincerity. "She smells like cinnamon. I like cinnamon." Natalia laughed, startled. Damien choked on his tea. "Well," she said, cheeks pink, "you just made my entire week." Caleb nodded solemnly, then returned to his sketching. And just like that, the heaviness cracked. A little warmth seeped in. After lunch, as they said their goodbyes near the lounge exit, Damien hesitated. "I know this is sudden," he said, "but I'd like to see you again." "You're a billionaire CEO," she said. "I serve pretzels at 30,000 feet. And you have more emotional intelligence than half my executive team." Natalia didn't smile. "Not quite." "I don't date passengers," she said gently. "Then I'll stop flying commercial." "That's not what I meant." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't just about romance. It's about Caleb. You reached him. You matter to him." She looked at the boy, and back at the man. Her heart was louder than her training. "I'll think about it," she whispered, then turned and walked away. But as she passed the mirrored wall, she didn't miss it. A tall woman in a cream trench coat, dark sunglasses, and icy expression. Victoria Vaughn, watching everything and dialing her phone. "Of course she's watching," Damien muttered under his breath as the lounge door slid shut behind Natalia. He turned, expression hardening into the face the boardroom knew well. the face Caleb hated. Victoria Vaughn, once his wife, now a polished specter of litigation and public image, approached with the poise of someone who always got what she wanted, or destroyed it if she didn't. "You really brought her here?" Victoria asked. Voice clipped, eyes darting toward Caleb. "In public? She helped him. He trusts her." "Oh, please. He trusts cartoon turtles. That doesn't mean you invite them to lunch with shareholders in the next room." Damien didn't reply, because that's what this was really about. Not Caleb. Reputation. Control. Power plays. "You need to end it," Victoria said, folding her arms, "before it becomes a liability." "There's nothing to end." She arched a brow, cool and amused. "Then why are you sweating?" He wasn't yet. But he could feel it coming. The headlines, the speculation. Damien Vaughn dates flight attendant. She leaned closer, her words like silk-wrapped blades. "If this becomes public, don't expect me to stay silent about what really happened with the custody hearing." He froze. Caleb was still sketching quietly a few seats away, oblivious. "You wouldn't," he said, voice low. "Try me." And just like that, She turned and walked off, trench coat swaying, heels echoing like a warning. The next day, back in Queens, Natalia stared at her cracked phone screen, rereading Damien's message for the 10th time. "You said you'd think about it, so have you?" She hadn't replied, because part of her wanted to say yes. And part of her, the part that still budgeted groceries by the penny, was screaming, "Don't be an idiot." People like Damien didn't fall for flight attendants, they passed through them. Besides, what would they even talk about? He discussed mergers. She memorized FAA codes. He wore cufflinks. She had one good pair of flats. It didn't make sense, except when it did. When she remembered the look on his face as she tied the ribbon around Caleb's wrist. The way he watched her laugh at his son's cinnamon comment, like he'd never seen anything so new. That night, over warm soup in her aunt's kitchen, Natalia finally confessed. "I met someone," she said. Aunt Margie blinked from across the table. She was 64, full of opinions, and wore pink curlers like a crown. "About time," she said, tearing bread. "Is he nice?" "He's intense, rich, complicated, and very kind to his son." Aunt Margie dunked her bread. "Rich, you say?" "That's not the point." "Oh, honey, at our age it is at least one of the points." Natalia laughed despite herself. "He's not the kind of man who belongs in my world." Margie looked up, her eyes softening. "Maybe your world's bigger than you think." Natalia went quiet, stirred her soup, then pulled the red ribbon from her pocket. Aunt Margie raised an eyebrow. "That from him?" "No, from his son, but yeah, kind of." And for the first time, Natalia let herself wonder, what if this wasn't a mistake? Meanwhile, across the city, Damien was pacing his penthouse office. Caleb was asleep in the next room, the ribbon now tied around his stuffed bear's neck. On the desk in front of Damien sat a sleek laptop and an open email draft. Subject, to Natalia Brooks, private invitation. He stared at the blinking cursor. He'd never asked a woman out this way, not directly, not nervously. He could buy islands, negotiate hostile takeovers, erase entire companies with one decision. But asking her to dinner? His hands actually shook. Finally he typed, "Natalia, I'd like to take you to dinner, not as a CEO, not as a father needing help, just as a man who hasn't smiled this much in a long time. I'll understand if it's no, but I hope it's not. Damien." He hovered over send, then clicked. The next morning, Natalia found the email during pre-flight briefing. Her heart nearly burst. She stared at it through safety announcements and seatbelt demos, afraid to answer, too afraid not to. On her break, she finally stepped into the galley, typed 3 words, "Dinner sounds nice." Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she hit send. She expected some fanfare. Instead, she got nothing, no reply, no confirmation, just silence. for 2 whole days. And when she did finally hear back, it wasn't from Damien, it was from a reporter. "Hi, Natalia. I'm with the New York Whisper. We'd love to speak with you about your relationship with Mr. Vaughn and your experience on the plane. Do you have a moment?" Her stomach dropped. The message had a screenshot attached. It was a photo, grainy but unmistakable. Natalia, Damien, and Caleb sharing lunch in the lounge, and in the foreground, half in frame, Victoria Vaughn, smiling. Natalia's fingers went numb. She looked again at the ribbon tied to her bag zipper, then at her phone. And then she realized Victoria leaked it. Natalia's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. New York, NY. She stared at it, her thumb hovering. Behind her, the galley rattled with the usual clinks and clicks, trays being stacked, carts being rolled, Ava humming off-key under her breath. But none of it registered. Only the screen did. Another buzz, then another. "Hi again, Natalia. Just following up. We'd love your comment before we go to press." Comment on what? They hadn't even asked a question, just sent that photo, and waited to see if she'd panic. And she did, not for herself, for Caleb. What if this made school harder for him? What if strangers started watching him, whispering? What if Damien regretted everything? Her heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the cabin noise. She tapped Damien Vaughn in her contacts, typed one sentence. "I think your ex just leaked a photo to the press." Then added, "And they're calling me." Sent. Seconds later, her phone rang again, but this time it was him. "Don't answer any calls," Damien said the moment she picked up. "No comment. No messages. Nothing." His voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear it. The rage beneath it, not at her, for her. "It's already out?" she asked quietly. "Not yet, but it will be." "You think she'll go through with it?" A long silence. "She's already started, and Natalia, I need you to listen to me. I am. If this goes public, I'll handle it. You won't speak to reporters. You won't defend yourself. You let me protect you." Her throat caught. No one had ever said that to her before. Not protect you like she was weak, but like she was worth shielding. "Okay," she whispered. Then, "And Caleb?" Damien's voice softened just enough to sound like him again. "He doesn't know. He doesn't need to. If he finds out, then he'll know I stood up for the woman who stood up for him." She leaned back against the bulkhead, closing her eyes. What happens now? "We control the story," Damien said. "We speak before they do." "We? If you'll trust me." She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. Her silence was her yes. Later that night, after her flight landed, Natalia sat at her tiny kitchen table in Queens, staring at a bowl of instant noodles she hadn't touched. Her phone vibrated once, then again. 2 notifications. One was a text. From Damien Vaughn. "Sent something to your inbox. Please read before you sleep." The other, an email. Subject, draft statement. It was from Damien's legal team. She opened it slowly, not sure what she expected. Something cold, corporate, full of legalese. Instead it read, "Mr. Vaughn wishes to clarify that the woman in the leaked photo is not a romantic partner, a PR stunt, or a paid employee. She is a private citizen whose moment of extraordinary kindness to his son changed their lives. Her name is Natalia Brooks. She deserves peace, not publicity." Natalia blinked, then read it again. Every word felt measured, deliberate, and protective. The kind of public dignity no one had ever offered her. Attached at the bottom was a note. "Natalia, if this isn't how you'd like to be seen, we don't send it. Your name, your choice." D. She exhaled. A long, shaking breath she didn't realize she'd been holding all day. And in that breath came clarity. The next morning, Damien stood in front of a sea of cameras at a tech summit in Manhattan. Reporters were already buzzing with whispers. The lounge photo, the mystery woman, the kid, the ribbon. Damien adjusted the mic. Steel blue suit, Burgundy tie, no smile. "Before we talk about algorithms or quarterly growth," he began, "I need to say something personal." Flashes went off. Phones lifted. 3 days ago, a photo was taken of me, my son, and a woman who has shown more grace under pressure than I ever have. Her name is Natalia Brooks. She is not famous. She is not looking for attention. She's a flight attendant who saw a child in distress and didn't look away. What she did for my son, no amount of money could buy. If you're looking for a scandal, there isn't one. If you're looking for decency, start with her. He paused, looked directly into the camera. And if anyone harms her reputation to get to me, I will pursue it to the full extent of the law. No one in the room moved, not even the reporters. Back in Queens, Natalia watched it all on her cracked phone screen. Soup reheating in the background. She wasn't crying, not yet. But she was holding the red ribbon in her fingers again, rolling it softly, letting it remind her that she mattered, not just in the sky, not just as a worker, but as a woman with dignity. And someone had just stood up for her, publicly. Clearly, not because she asked for it, because she earned it. Hours later, there was a knock on her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened it. There stood Damien. Jeans, black coat, no security detail. Just a man on a stoop with tired eyes and a small brown paper bag in his hands. "I didn't want to wait another day," he said. "For what?" He lifted the bag. "You missed lunch. I brought soup." She smiled. "You didn't make this, did you?" "Don't insult me. I had it delivered. From a place with more stars than your phone has battery." That made her laugh. The kind that bubbled up without warning. And just like that, the tension broke. She stepped aside. "Come in." And when he entered, he saw it. On the table. The ribbon. Still bright. Still folded. Waiting for what would happen next. The soup was still warm when they sat down at her tiny kitchen table. It came in a porcelain container from a place called La Belle Maison, the kind of restaurant that didn't list prices on the menu and called water still or sparkling with an accent. Damien set it down like it was sacred. Natalia, still wearing her simple cotton dress from the day, raised an eyebrow as she found 2 old, mismatched napkins from a drawer. He accepted one without complaint. "You didn't have to come all the way here," she said, smoothing the edge of the napkin on her lap. "I didn't come for soup." She glanced at him over the candle she hadn't meant to light. It had flickered on automatically earlier with the dusk. Now it glowed between them like it had been waiting. Damien had removed his coat, revealing a black sweater over a dress shirt with the top button undone. The sharp edges of his usual presence, the cufflinks, the power posture, the unyielding jaw, had softened. Tonight, he looked human. Handsome, yes, composed, but also just a little unsure. "I didn't want the last word between us to be a press statement," he added. "You didn't write that?" she teased gently. He smirked. "My team started it. I deleted half. The rest, that was me." Natalia dipped a spoon into the soup, letting the scent wash over her. Roasted garlic, fresh herbs, and something buttery and comforting she couldn't quite name. "Well," she said, "it was the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me in public. It wasn't enough. It was everything." They ate in silence for a moment. Comfortable, companionable, the way people do when the noise between them has already been cleared and what's left is truth. Damien's eyes drifted to the old Polaroid taped to her fridge. A little boy with a bowl haircut, grinning through an ice cream mustache, clutching a red toy airplane. "Your brother?" he asked. "Benji, he's 23 now, studying music therapy in Boston." "Autistic? Like Caleb?" She nodded. "Not the same. No 2 kids are. But yeah, that photo. He'd just gotten through his first haircut without crying. We took him out for ice cream to celebrate." Damien blinked, as if absorbing something deeper than the story. "You celebrate haircuts?" "When you're fighting the world for your child's peace," she said softly, "you celebrate everything." There it was again, That pause in him, not admiration, recognition, as if he was just now understanding. She hadn't soothed Caleb by luck or magic. She'd done it because she knew, because she'd lived this kind of fight. "You've done this before," he murmured. "I've lived it." They fell into another thoughtful silence, both of them leaning ever so slightly forward, toward something neither had named out loud. Then, a knock at the door. Natalia blinked, surprised. It was almost 9 p.m. She opened it. There stood Ava, her flight attendant friend, in gym leggings and a messy bun, wide-eyed with second-hand panic. "Okay, don't freak out," Ava said without taking a breath, "but there's another article, and it's not good." She held out her phone like it was radioactive. Natalia scrolled. Flight risk? Sources say Vaughn's mystery, woman may face suspension for conflict of interest. The article danced with insinuation, airline insider, questionable judgment, inappropriate relationship, all beneath a grainy image of her in the galley, red scarf visible, her smile frozen forever in implication. Natalia felt like the floor had shifted under her feet. "They're trying to get me fired," she whispered. "They won't," Damien said instantly, standing. Ava looked at him, then back at Natalia. "They could, Nat. You know how this works. The airline doesn't like press. Doesn't matter if it's your fault." "They just don't want mess?" Natalia backed away from the counter, her heart pounding, not from guilt, from fear. Fear that the thing she'd worked so hard to build, her quiet little life, might be taken from her because she'd done something good. She felt Damien watching her, and when she met his eyes, she saw it. The guilt. The man who always controlled the damage was now the cause of it. "I should go," he said quietly. "You don't have to." "But I should." He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. "Can I see you tomorrow?" Natalia hesitated, then, with a small, sad smile, "If I still have a job." Damien turned back to her, eyes steady. "You'll still have me." Then he was gone. The next morning, Natalia arrived at JFK an hour early, her uniform pressed so perfectly it felt like armor. Her heart thudded as she walked toward the crew lounge. Her supervisor, Dana, met her at the door. "Natalia," she said not unkindly, "they want you on personal leave for a while, just until the noise dies down." Natalia didn't argue. She just nodded once. Then walked out, past the tarmac windows, past the children waiting to board, past the whispering crew, back to her little apartment in Queens. She didn't cry, she didn't call anyone. She made tea. She tied around her own wrist the keepsake ribbon Damien had given her, not Caleb's. And she sat at her table, staring out the window like the quiet would explain things to her. Until her phone pinged, a message from Damien. "Check your email, don't panic." She opened it. There it was. An offer from Vaughn Tech. Position, private family consultant. Flexible hours, travel included. Primary focus, sensory and emotional support for Caleb Vaughn, especially during public events and transitions. Salary, generous, but not flaunting. Attached was a short note. "This is not a rescue. It's recognition. You helped him in 30 minutes more than specialists have in 3 years. I won't insult you by calling it charity, but I hope you'll consider it a chance for both of us." Natalia stared at the screen. She didn't open the contract yet. Her fingers brushed the ribbon tied gently around her wrist. Outside, the city moved on. Planes roared above, news continued to churn, and somewhere out there, a little boy still wore a matching ribbon on his wrist. Maybe they weren't supposed to make sense on paper. Maybe this wasn't the life she planned. But what if it was better? What if she was being asked not to step down, but to step into something new? Natalia didn't sleep. The contract sat unopened on the kitchen table, like a letter from another version of her life. A version that wore silk instead of polyester and didn't worry about rent at the end of the month. Every time she thought about saying yes, Her stomach twisted. Not because she didn't want to. Because she did. Too much. And that scared her more than anything. She wasn't used to people seeing value in her. Not beyond keeping things running, staying out of the way, doing the job with a smile. But this was an invitation to be needed, to step into something bigger than herself, and maybe, if she was honest, something deeper. By sunrise, her tea had gone cold, her eyes were sore, and the ribbon on her wrist had been untied and retied 12 times. She had just pulled out her phone to draft a message when it lit up. Incoming call. Damian Vaughn. She answered on the second ring. "I didn't mean to call this early." Hi, he said. His voice low and worn. "But there's something you need to know." Natalia straightened, heart thudding. "Is Caleb okay?" "He's fine, but he's asking for you." She blinked. "Me?" He woke up around 4, couldn't settle. I tried music, I tried the weighted blanket. He kept saying, "Ribbon lady," over and over again. Natalia's breath caught. I didn't know he remembered me like that. He remembers everything, he just can't always say it. There was a pause. "He drew something yesterday," Damian added. "It's you, and him, and a plane, and he put the ribbon in the sky like it's flying." Natalia pressed her fingers to her lips. "He misses you," Damian said. "I miss you." She closed her eyes. This wasn't a trap. It wasn't a fantasy. It was real, messy, risky, but real. And some part of her, the part that once learned how to celebrate haircuts and train rides and soft noise, was ready. "I'll come by," she said. "But not for the job." Damian's voice was steady. "Okay, I'll come for him. Then I'll meet you at the car in 20. The Vaughn car wasn't flashy, just quiet luxury, sleek lines, and an interior that smelled like cedar wood and restraint. Damian waited outside in a charcoal coat, holding a thermos. "Mint tea," he said, offering it to her with a hesitant smile. "Figured you'd be tired." Natalia accepted it, stunned. No one had ever thought about her morning before. They drove in silence at first, the city just beginning to stretch and blink. As they crossed into Tribeca, Natalia finally turned to him. "You know this puts a target on me, right? If I step into your life?" Damian didn't flinch. "Then I'll step into yours. We'll balance each other." "You say that like it's easy. I say it like it's worth it." She looked away, the steam from the tea curling into the window. He didn't push further. That, too, was something new. Caleb was waiting in the penthouse, sitting cross-legged in his pajamas. The red ribbon still wrapped around his wrist like a badge of honor. When he saw her, he lit up. Not loudly, not with a yell or run, just his eyes. A smile so wide and pure it cracked her heart open in a place she didn't know had closed. "Ribbon lady," he whispered. Natalia crouched. "Hi." "Sweetheart." He held out a small drawing. Stick figures with bright eyes and uneven limbs. A big red ribbon arched like a rainbow over their heads. "This is you," he said, pointing. "You make the sky quiet." She laughed, gently touched his hand. "I missed you too." Damian watched from the hallway. Still, silent and utterly undone. They spent the morning doing puzzles. Caleb liked ones with animals, especially sea creatures. Natalia taught him a new trick with the corner pieces, and he taught her how to hum like a stingray. She wasn't sure that was accurate, but it made him giggle, so she went along. Around noon, Damian stepped in with grilled cheese sandwiches and fresh fruit. Natalia blinked. "You cooked?" "Assembled," he corrected. "If it needs more than 4 ingredients, I call for backup." They all sat on the floor. No dining room, no silverware, just 3 people eating from paper plates, watching an animated whale on the TV, and for a moment, it felt like a life. Not borrowed, not staged, built. After lunch, as Caleb curled up under a soft weighted blanket for quiet time, Damian walked her to the elevator. She expected an awkward thank you or a tentative hug. Instead, he said, "I didn't offer you that job because of PR or image. I offered it because I've never seen him trust someone that quickly. I didn't say yes. You didn't say no. He looked at her, really looked at her. No boardroom mask, no cool charm. If you come into our lives, it won't be as a hired helper, it'll be as you, someone I admire, someone who's already family to him. Natalia felt her throat tighten. And to you? He didn't hesitate. I think I loved you the second you didn't flinch at his scream. The elevator dinged. That's not love, she said, voice barely above a whisper. No, he agreed. But it's how it started. She stepped into the elevator, her eyes never leaving his. Just before the doors closed, he said, one more thing. Victoria knows about the job offer. She won't sit quietly. And that's when Natalia knew this wasn't over. 3 days passed. 3 soft, strange days. Natalia didn't officially accept the job, but she didn't return to the airline either. Instead, she floated in that quiet space in between, where everything was fragile and possible. Each morning, Caleb called her. No words at first, just his breathing. Sometimes a hum, sometimes the sound of crayons against paper. Natalia never hung up. Each afternoon, Damien sent her small things, a playlist with calming music, an old article about sensory sensitivity, a photo of Caleb asleep holding the ribbon like a teddy bear. And each night she found herself sitting at her kitchen table, contract open, staring at the same line. This offer recognizes emotional expertise beyond formal education. Compassion is a qualification. Her hands would hover over the keyboard, but she never typed her answer until the 4th morning. It began with a call, not from Damien, from Clara, her supervisor at the airline. Hey, sweetheart, I thought you should know something before you hear it elsewhere. Natalia gripped the counter. What now? Someone, anonymously, sent HR a list of your social media posts. Nothing bad, but enough for them to flag you as potential distraction. I don't even have social media. Exactly. They said that too, which makes it worse. How? They think you're hiding something. The airline was spooked by the optics after the leak. No social footprint turned into a risk factor in the internal report. Natalia's heart dropped. Clara sighed. Look, I'm not supposed to say this, but we all know who's behind it. Victoria? Natalia didn't say her name out loud. She didn't need to. An hour later, Damien called. No small talk this time. No warmth. Just one sentence, flat and clipped. She filed a motion. Natalia sat down. What kind of motion? Custody. Partial. She's claiming I've created an unstable environment by involving Caleb with someone who isn't medically trained. Natalia felt the room tilt. You mean me? She's painting you as reckless, opportunistic. Said your suspension from the airline proves you're unpredictable. I didn't do anything wrong. I know that. But it doesn't matter, does it? It will, he said, voice steady. I won't let her tear you down to get to me. Natalia was silent. She looked at her cracked phone screen, her thrift store kitchen chairs, the ribbon now tucked safely inside her coat pocket. This is too much, she said quietly. I'm not built for this kind of war. You're stronger than you think. That doesn't mean I want to fight. Then don't fight for me, he said. Fight for him. That stopped her cold, because she could still see Caleb's face in her mind, that innocent joy when he'd said, You make the sky quiet. And suddenly her fear didn't matter, only that he didn't lose the quiet again. That night, Damien invited her to a brownstone on the Upper East Side. Not his, not corporate, a neutral space. He opened the door himself. No staff, no security, just him, and candles. Flickering gently on a table set for 2. I needed you to have one night, he said. That wasn't about custody or contracts. Natalia stepped inside slowly. This is your idea of casual? He shrugged. The candles are from Caleb. He said you like soft lights. She blinked. He said that? He drew a picture, pointed at the lights, said, Her eyes don't hurt when it's soft. Her throat tightened. He sees everything, she murmured. So do you, Damien replied. That's why I'm asking you not to walk away. I don't want to, but your world is like glass. Everything reflects, everything shatters. Then let's build something that doesn't break. I don't know if I belong in that world. Damien stepped closer. No rush, no pressure, just the space between them narrowing. Then we'll make a new one, for him, for us. She exhaled. I haven't said yes yet. You will. You sound confident. I sound hopeful. And then he pulled out something small from his coat pocket. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't flashy. It was a tiny white ceramic airplane, hand-painted with a red ribbon on the tail. Caleb made this in art therapy, Damien said. He said it was for you. Natalia took it in her hands, heart trembling. Why a plane? Because you came from the sky. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Instead, she reached into her coat, untied the keepsake ribbon from her wrist, and looped it gently around the base of the little ceramic plane's wing. And in that moment, she knew her answer. It had never been about Damien, or even herself. It was always about the boy who used to scream in silence, and now hummed like a stingray. Later, as they sat at the table eating simple roasted chicken and rosemary potatoes, Natalia finally said, I'll take the job. Damien looked up slowly. Are you sure? Not even a little, he smiled. But you're saying yes anyway? I'm saying yes because you both feel like home. He reached across the table, not to hold her hand, but just to be close. Then we fight, he said. Together? Always. But outside in a dark car parked half a block away, Victoria Vaughn sat with her attorney, her sharp cheekbones catching the dashboard light. She watched the brownstone window flicker softly with candles. Her voice cut through the silence. If I can't control the narrative, I'll burn it down. Her lawyer hesitated. That could backfire. Let it. She opened a folder full of documents, photos, and one old email. She won't survive what I'm about to release. The first email came at 7:14 a.m. Subject line, Urgent Media Inquiry re. Natalia Brooks Incident, 2017. Natalia didn't open it right away. She was busy packing Caleb's travel bag, 2 pairs of noise-canceling headphones, his favorite lavender-scented wipes, and the red ribbon gently folded in the front pocket. It was going to be his first public event since the photo leak, a children's museum unveiling an inclusive sensory exhibit. Damien was speaking. Caleb had been invited to cut the ribbon. Natalia had spent 2 nights preparing him for it. She wasn't going to let fear get in the way, not again. But as her phone buzzed a second time, then a third, her fingers trembled. The world outside was moving fast. She opened the first email, a tabloid, attached, a police report, dated 2017. Location, Boston. Charge, disturbance of the peace. Natalia stared at the screen. Her body went cold. They had found it, an incident from 8 years ago, the night she had shielded her brother, Benji, from a security guard who had tried to forcibly remove him from a cafe during a meltdown. She had raised her voice, grabbed the guard's arm. They'd called the police. She had spent one night in a holding cell before the charges were dropped, but there it was. In ink, now twisted into a headline. Flight attendant turned nanny has violent past involving autistic boy. She dropped the phone. Her breath came short, tight. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a weapon. Across town, Damien's phone rang at the exact same time. His publicist, Monica, didn't waste words. Victoria leaked it through a proxy. We traced the route. And Damien, she hesitated. What? She's not just trying to humiliate Natalia. She's using it to argue that Caleb isn't safe in her presence. Damien stood up so fast, he knocked his chair over. That's absurd. She's the only person who's ever made him feel safe. She's playing the optics. If Ms. Brooks had an outburst with one autistic child, who's to say it couldn't happen again? He paced. This is desperation. No, Monica said. It's strategy, and it might work, unless you address it. Fast. Meanwhile, Caleb was sitting on the couch, twisting the ribbon around his fingers, watching Natalia pace the apartment. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just looked lost. You didn't tell him, a small voice said. Natalia turned. Caleb wasn't looking at her, just at the floor. You didn't tell him the truth. She sank beside him. No, I didn't. He was quiet a moment, then held out the ribbon. You can still tie it. Natalia blinked. What? It's not broken, Caleb said softly. It just came undone. And just like that, the weight lifted, a little. She reached over and gently tied the ribbon around his wrist again. You're right. Kiddo, she stood. Time to tell the truth. Damien's driver pulled up outside her building 20 minutes later. She climbed in without a word. Damien was already inside. He turned the moment the door shut. Natalia. It's true, she said, cutting him off. All of it. I was 20. My brother was melting down in public. A security guard grabbed him too hard. I pushed him. Police came. I spent the night in a cell. Charges dropped the next day. She met his eyes steady. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. Not of what I did, but that I had to do it. Damien didn't flinch. You protected your brother. And now I might lose my job. Again, and you could lose Caleb. Not happening. You can't control what she... No, he said, voice firm, but I can control how I stand beside you. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. What are you doing? Calling a press conference. No, she grabbed his wrist. No more statements. No more fighting back through headlines. I don't want to play her game. Then, what do you want? She looked at him. Really looked. Let me speak. Let me tell the truth. On camera. No PR spin, no script. Just me. Damien hesitated. They'll twist your words. They already are. That following afternoon, Natalia stood behind a microphone in a quiet room filled with only 5 reporters and 1 live stream camera. It was a limited access briefing, arranged to reduce noise and control framing. No flashy lights, no prepared notes, just her. She wore her airline blouse, the one with the soft red scarf around her neck. A silent nod to who she'd always been. There's a story going around, she began, about something that happened in Boston in 2017, and since no one's asking me, I figured I'd offer the version no one else has. She took a breath. My brother is autistic. Back then, we didn't have money for private therapies or understanding friends. One day in a coffee shop, he got overwhelmed, started crying, rocking. A guard tried to drag him outside. I told him to stop. He didn't. I panicked. I pushed him. She looked up. I'd do it again. A reporter blinked. No one spoke. The charges were dropped because the city realized what had really happened. But the experience stuck. Not because I was embarrassed, but because it showed me what kids like my brother and Caleb face in this world. Her voice cracked. They don't need pity or silence. They need people who will sit with them in the noise and say, "You're safe. I'm not leaving." Her hands were trembling now, but her words were sure. I'm not here to be a hero. I'm not trying to climb a ladder. I just want to be someone Caleb can count on, because no child should be treated like a burden just because the world doesn't understand them. She paused. If that disqualifies me from being near him, then maybe we're asking the wrong questions. The room stayed silent. Then one person clapped, then another. Later, in the hallway, Damien met her with red eyes and a proud smile. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Natalia leaned into him, not for applause, just for rest. But what neither of them saw was that the clip was already going viral. And far across town, in a marble kitchen, Victoria Vaughn stared at the footage with a stunned expression, because for the first time in years, she was losing the narrative. The museum was still closed to the public when they arrived. It was early, just after 8 a.m., and a light spring rain tapped gently on the skylights above the new sensory inclusion wing of the Children's Discovery Museum. The lights were dimmed, the music was low, and the smell of fresh paint mixed with something warm and herbal, like lavender. It was Caleb's day, no reporters, no audience, just 10 hand-picked guests and a morning tour before the exhibit's official opening. Damien was scheduled to speak. Caleb would cut the ribbon. And Natalia? She was just there to walk beside him, a constant, quiet presence. She carried his small travel bag on one shoulder, filled with his favorite objects, a pack of texture cards, a soft weighted blanket, and the red ribbon folded carefully inside the front pouch. Caleb was calm, humming faintly as they moved through the gallery entrance. His new blue sneakers squeaked softly on the floors, and his fingers brushed the wall as if checking the world for truth. "I think he's regulating himself," Natalia whispered, as they passed a calming water-wall display. "That's good, right?" Damien asked. "It's everything." The sensory room opened like a dream. The walls were bathed in soft blues and greens, and moving light danced on the ceiling like stars in water. There were soft mats, pillows that glowed, tactile stations with velvet and rice and foam. A gentle, invisible structure guided children from one experience to another, but let them choose how to move. Caleb didn't hesitate. He walked straight to a tunnel of hanging ribbons, pushed through them like a slow-moving fish, and popped out the other side, grinning. "He's never done that before," Damien whispered. Natalia glanced at him. "What?" "Gone into a new place without freezing. Usually he stands by the door, watches, waits. Today he just went." They watched Caleb bounce lightly on a padded platform, touching the projected lights with fascination. He didn't look nervous, didn't glance at Damien for reassurance. Then something happened. Caleb turned around, walked back to Natalia, and reached for her hand. Not to steady himself, not out of fear. He just wanted to share the moment. She froze, letting him take it. His small hand slipped into hers, warm and confident. "He trusts me," she whispered. "He loves you," Damien said softly. She turned to look at him, and in his eyes there was no hesitation. He didn't mean just Caleb. After the ribbon was cut, a soft fabric strip in muted pastel blue, the guests gathered in a quiet community room for a small reception. Just juice, sandwiches, and apples, sprinkled with cinnamon sugar. Caleb sat on a beanbag in the corner, sketching with a brown crayon on the back of the program brochure. His drawing was uneven but joyful, stick figures with wide eyes, a house with round windows, and a sky full of stars. "That one's me," he said suddenly, pointing. "And that's her." Damien leaned over to look. Natalia had curly hair and a red ribbon around her wrist. There were no cameras, but one museum coordinator, a soft-spoken woman with thick glasses and a gray braid, approached with gentle hands. "Would you mind if we took a photo of Caleb with his drawing? Just for the exhibit's records, it won't be public." Natalia looked to Damien, who nodded with a soft smile. She sat beside Caleb, and he placed the drawing in her lap. Then he picked up the ceramic airplane he'd made for her, the one with the red ribbon tied around the tail, and handed it to her. She held both in her lap as the camera clicked once. One quiet, perfect moment, captured for no one's benefit but theirs. By noon, the rain had cleared. The sun poked through the clouds like a shy child peeking from behind curtains. Outside on the museum's quiet terrace, Caleb stomped through shallow puddles in his rain boots. Natalia and Damien walked slowly behind him, hands in pockets, not quite touching. "He'll sleep well tonight," she said, watching Caleb splash. "So will I," Damien said. "You're different these days." "Different how?" "Less armor, fewer walls." He paused. "Maybe that's what happens when you finally trust the person walking beside you." She smiled faintly. Then stopped walking. He stopped too. She turned to him, heart full. "I've been thinking." dangerous," he teased gently. "What it means to love someone like this," she continued, "not the fairy tale kind, not the dramatic rush, but the real kind, the 'I'll stand in the noise with you' kind, the only kind that lasts." Natalia looked up at him, sunlight brushing her face. "I think I might be falling for you." He didn't blink, didn't speak right away. Then, with great care, he reached up and brushed a damp curl from her cheek. "I'm already there." The kiss that followed wasn't urgent or loud. It was slow, steady, like the two of them had already kissed with their actions for weeks. And this was just the punctuation. When they pulled back, Natalia rested her forehead against his. "That was worth waiting for," she murmured. "So are you." Back at the penthouse, Caleb curled up on the couch, his turtle plush tucked beneath one arm, a small pillow under his knees. Natalia sat beside him, handing him his coloring book and a red marker. "You know what today was?" she asked. Caleb shook his head, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "A good day," she said softly. "A day your brain felt safe." He didn't respond. Just reached into her pocket, pulled out the red ribbon, and tied it, slowly, around his turtle's leg. 2 loops, 1 careful knot. "It's not broken," he whispered. "It just came undone." Natalia blinked. "What is?" "The sky." He looked up. "It's fixed now." She swallowed a sob, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "It is." In another part of the city, Victoria Vaughn stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her glass-walled condo. Watching the city she once ruled blink indifferently in the sun. Her assistant hovered nearby. The response to Natalia's speech, it's still trending. "I know." "And the settlement?" Victoria sipped her wine. "I'm signing it." "You're backing down?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at a paused frame of the museum footage. Natalia holding Caleb's hand, the ribbon blowing lightly in the breeze. "She didn't fight me," Victoria whispered. "She loved louder than I hated." She turned away from the screen. "That's how I lost." And in the silence that followed, there was no applause, no headlines, just the quiet sound of power shifting, for good. Natalia had never brought anyone home, not like this. Not to Aunt Margie's house in Queens, with its crooked garden gnome, the smell of lavender and fried onions, and the blessed sign over the stove that had once caught fire during a brisket emergency. But today wasn't about perfection. It was about belonging. The door opened before they could even knock. "You brought him," Aunt Margie whispered. "And him." Caleb stood on the front step in a dinosaur hoodie, holding a container of cinnamon apples. Damien held a bouquet of blue hydrangeas and a very serious expression. Natalia smiled nervously. "This is Aunt Margie." "Margie, this is Caleb and Damien." Margie peered down at the boy, eyes softening. "You like cinnamon?" she asked. Caleb nodded solemnly. "You like ribbon?" she added, noticing the strip tied to his plush turtle. Another nod. "Good. Then you can stay." Lunch was simple. Chicken salad on rye, sweet pickles, lemon water, and 1 tray of cookies that Caleb cautiously circled for 10 minutes before choosing the one shaped like a star. He sat beside Margie on the couch, drawing on a napkin while she showed him photos of her old garden. "What's this?" Caleb asked, pointing to a faded picture. "That's a lilac bush. It smelled like heaven and attracted bees. One of them stung my backside in 1989. That's when I started wearing pants." Caleb giggled. A rare, round little sound. Natalia froze, startled. So did Damien. Caleb didn't even notice. He just kept giggling as Margie pointed to her photos. "Making up nonsense stories about storks and moonflowers." "He's laughing," Damien said under his breath. "He's safe," Natalia replied, and in that moment the house didn't feel small or mismatched or humble. It felt like home. Later, while Caleb napped in the guest bedroom with his turtle tucked under his chin, Natalia and Damien sat on the back porch sipping iced tea and listening to the low hum of the neighbor's lawnmower. He asked to come today, Damien said, his voice quiet. He did? Told me he wanted to see Ribbon Lady's family. Said maybe her house has soft lights, too. Natalia smiled at her glass. That's the highest compliment I've ever gotten. Damien leaned forward. You know this could be more, if you want it. She looked at him, not startled, just still. More? A real future, not just me hiring you, not just being part of Caleb's support system. He took a breath. I want to build something with you. Not fast, not for show, but real. I want us. She didn't answer right away. The breeze caught a loose curl of her hair. All of this feels like something real, she whispered. But I need to be sure it's not just relief, that we're not just holding on because we survived something hard. I've already let go of everything else, he said. But not you. Natalia reached into her purse, pulled out her keepsake ribbon, and ran it slowly through her fingers. Then let's not rush. Let's just live. He nodded. And, for the first time, there was no tension between them, no question looming, just now. They returned to the living room to find Caleb and Aunt Margie engaged in serious conversation about moon juice and whether frogs could wear pants. Caleb's feet were kicked up on the ottoman, completely relaxed. He likes her, Natalia said. She's terrifying. Of course he does. Margie looked up. He said, I was nicer than you. Damien shrugged. He's not wrong. They stayed until sunset, long enough for Caleb to build a turtle fort out of pillows and demand that Aunt Margie be the doorman. When they finally left, Margie hugged Natalia tight. You deserve this, she whispered. Don't wait so long to believe it. That night, back at Damien's apartment, Caleb was already asleep when Natalia stepped out onto the balcony. The skyline shimmered, quiet and open. Damien joined her with 2 mugs of tea. He asked if the ribbon could stay on his turtle forever. Of course, she said. He said, it's how I know she's real. Natalia's eyes stung, not with grief, with gratitude. She turned to Damien. This doesn't feel like the end of a story, she said, because it's not. It feels like the beginning of one we didn't know we were allowed to live. He smiled. Then, quietly, reached into his pocket and handed her something small. The ribbon, fresh, new, still red, but this one was different, her own ribbon now, with her name embroidered on the edge. It's yours, he said, for the days you forget you matter. I don't think I'll forget again. Even so, she held it to her chest. And beneath the soft city sky, with the boy asleep inside and the man standing beside her, Natalia finally let herself believe she wasn't passing through someone else's story. She was finally in her own. The airport looked different this time. Natalia stood just outside the gate at JFK, watching planes drift lazily across the runway. No uniform, no clipboard, no schedule, just a soft navy coat, red ribbon tied at her wrist, and a carry-on bag with a well-loved turtle plush sticking out of the zipper. Caleb leaned against her leg, humming gently, twisting a paper boarding pass in his fingers. Is this your first time flying without working? He asked. Natalia nodded. Feels strange. Like stealing? She laughed, a real laugh, light and surprised. A little. It's okay, he said seriously. You can still wear the scarf. It doesn't mean you work. It means you're you. She looked down at him, her heart soft and full. I think you're right. I'm always right, he whispered, then added, That's what Margie says. They were headed to San Francisco. Just a weekend, a family trip. No press, no business, no speeches, just them. A museum, a beach walk, maybe a turtle sanctuary if Caleb could handle the noise. Damien was already checking in their bags, his phone silenced, his tie gone. Natalia watched him from a distance. He's different now, she said to Caleb. He's better now, Caleb replied. He learned how to love out loud. Natalia blinked. Where'd you hear that? TV, he shrugged. But it's true. At the gate. Damien returned with hot chocolates and snacks. Gate change, he said, offering the cup to Natalia. We're at 32A now. More walking? Or more talking? They strolled together slowly. No hurry, no fear. While Caleb walked ahead, his ribbon fluttering from his wrist like a tiny red flag of victory. Halfway there, he stopped beside a boy who looked about his age, sobbing in his mother's lap, overstimulated, kicking the floor. Natalia froze, but Caleb didn't. He crouched gently, untied the ribbon from his wrist, and held it out. "It helps," he said. The other boy stared wide-eyed and slowly reached out. Their fingers touched. Natalia's hand covered her mouth. Damien whispered, low and stunned, "He's giving it away." The original ribbon, the very first one, left his wrist without fear. Natalia felt her chest tighten as she watched him let go. But she still carried her own keepsake ribbon, tucked safely away, a reminder that the bond would never be lost. But he wasn't crying, he was smiling, because the boy who once screamed in the sky was now calming someone else's storm. Hours later, above the clouds, Caleb slept beside Damien with his head on his shoulder, Turtle in his lap. Natalia watched them, eyes shining, hand brushing lightly against Damien's on the shared armrest. "This is everything I never knew I needed," she whispered. "Me too." He glanced over. "You ever miss it? Flying? Serving? The sky?" She thought for a long moment. "No." He raised an eyebrow. She shrugged, smiling. "You don't have to fly to be free." Damien leaned over, touched her hand. "Then let's stay free." Together. The rest of the flight passed in soft conversation, shared snacks, and Caleb occasionally humming the Jaws theme under his breath just to make them nervous. When they landed, the sun was beginning to set over the Pacific. A soft golden light filtered through the windows as the terminal doors opened. And the three of them stepped out, hand in hand. Not into a fairy tale, not into fantasy, but into something far more rare. A true story with nothing to prove, just something to build. Together. Months later, back in New York, a small package arrived for Natalia, no return address, inside a red velvet box. Soft as the ribbon that started it all. She opened it slowly, expecting jewelry. It wasn't. Inside was a folded boarding pass, first class, no destination printed, just one name, Natalia Brooks Vaughn. Underneath, a note written in Damien's familiar hand. "You changed how he sees the world. You changed how I love inside it." No more departures, only arrivals. Welcome home. Natalia held it to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she looked out the window and whispered, "I finally landed." In the end, dignity was restored. Love was no longer just longed for, it was lived. Family bonds that once felt fragile became unbreakable. Justice came not through revenge, but through quiet, steady truth. A child's world became safer, quieter, stronger. And a woman who once served coffee at 30,000 feet now belongs to a sky of her own choosing. The red ribbon? It was passed on, not because it was no longer needed, but because it had done its job. And that's what healed people do. They heal others. One small act of compassion can carry farther than any plane. You don't have to fly to be free. The end. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever met someone who changed your life just by staying when others walked away? Share your story in the comments. And from 0 to 10, how would you rate this journey? If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and come back for more stories of strength, softness, and quiet hope. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.